Part 11 of the one and only Ivan. We just left off, and Ivan is done with all of his paintings, and he's trying to give a message to Julia, but she's not getting the message, and has taken all of his hard work and all of his paintings and was going to leave them by Mac's office so he can sell them. Oh dear, that's where we left off. Part 11, chest beating. Often when visitors come to see me, they beat their hands against their puny chests, pretending to be me. They pound away, soundless as the wet wings of a new butterfly. The chest beating of a mad gorilla is not something you ever want to hear, not even if you're wearing earplugs, not even if you're 3 miles away wearing earplugs. A real chest beating sends the whole jungle running, as if the sky has broken up, as if men with guns are near. Thump. The sound, my sound, echoes through the mall. George and Julia spin around. Julia drops her backpack. George drops his keys. The pile of pictures goes flying. Thump, thump, thump. I bounce off the walls. I screech and bellow. I beat and beat and beat my chest. Bob hides under knot tag, his paws over his ears. I'm angry at last because I have someone to protect. After a long while, I grow quiet. I sit. It's hard work being angry. Julia looks at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm panting. I'm a little out of shape. What the heck was that? George demands. Something's really wrong, Julia says. I've never seen Ivan act this way. He seems to be calming down, thank goodness, George says. Julia shakes her head. He's still upset, Dad. Look at his eyes. My pictures are scattered all over the floor like huge autumn leaves. What a mess, George says, sighing. Wish I hadn't bothered sweeping tonight. Do you think Ivan's okay? Julia asks. Probably just a temper tantrum, George says. He reaches under a chair to retrieve a brown and red picture. Can't say I blame the guy. He's stuck in that tiny cage all these years. There's all his pictures scattered all over the place. Julia starts to answer, but then she freezes and tilts her head. She stares at her feet where my pictures lie in disarray. Dad? She whispers. Come see this. Oh, I'm sure he's another Rembrandt, George says. Let's pick these up and get going, Jules. I'm exhausted. No, Dad. Seriously, look at this. George follows her gaze. I see blobs. Many, many blobs, along with the occasional swirl. Please, can we just go home now? Dad, that's an H. Julia kneels down, straightening one picture, then another. That's an H. And here. She grabs more pictures. Put this one here. And, I don't know, maybe that one? You have an E? George rubs his eyes, and I hold my breath. Julia is running now. She picks up one picture, sets down another. Dad, it's like a puzzle. This is something. It's a word. Maybe words. And a picture of something. A giant picture. Jules, this is crazy, George says. But now he's looking at the floor too, wandering from picture to picture and scratching his head. H, Julia says. E-O? H-O-E? Ho? Julia chews her lower lip. H-E-O. That looks a lot like an I. I. Like this kind of I. H-E-O-I. George writes in the air with his fingers. I. E-O-H. No, not the letter. An actual I. And that's a foot. Or maybe a tree. And a trunk. Dad, I think it's a trunk. Julia runs to my window. Ivan, she whispers, what did you make? I stare back. I cross my arms. This is taking much longer than I thought it would. Humans. Sometimes they make chimps look smart. Julia and George take the pictures to the ring where there's room to see them all. An hour passes as they try to assemble my puzzle. Ruby's awake now, and she and Bob and I watch. Ivan, Ruby says, is that a picture of me? Yes, I say proudly. Where am I supposed to be? That's a zoo, Ruby. See the walls and the grass and the people looking at you? Ruby squints. Well, who are all those other elephants? You haven't met them, I say. Not yet. It's a very nice zoo, Ruby says, with an approving nod. Bob nudges me with his cold nose. It is indeed. In the ring, Julia pumps her fist in the air. Yes, she cries. I told you, Dad. There it is. H-O-M-E. Home. George gazes at the letters. He spins around to look at me. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Jules. You know, a once-in-a-trillion kind of thing, like that old saying about the chimp and the typewriter. Give him long enough and he'll write a novel. I make a grumbling noise. As if a chimp could write a letter, let alone a book. Then how do you explain the rest of it, Julia demands. The picture of Ruby in the zoo? How do you know it's a zoo, George asks. See the circle on the gate? There's a red giraffe in it. George squints and tilts his head. Are you sure that's a giraffe? I was thinking more along the lines of a deformed cat. It's the logo for the zoo, Dad. It's on all their signs. Explain that. George gives her a helpless smile. I can't even begin to. I'm just saying there has to be a logical explanation. Look how big this is. Julia puts the last piece of Ruby's right ear into place. It's huge. It's definitely large, George agrees. Julia watches me. She chews on her thumbnail, and I see the question in her eyes. She turns back to the paintings and stares at them, looking, truly looking. And a slow smile dawns on Julia's face. Dad, she says, I have an idea. A big idea. Julia races around the edge of my painting, her arms spread wide. Billboard big. I'm not following you. I think this is meant to be on the billboard. That's what Ivan wants. George crosses his arms over his chest. What Ivan wants, he repeats slowly. And you know this because you two have been chatting? Because I'm an artist, and he's an artist. Uh-huh, says George. Julia clasps her hands together. Come on, Dad, I'm begging you. George shakes his head. No, I'm not doing that. No billboard. No way. I'll get the ladder, Julia says. You get the glue. I know it's dark out, but the billboard's lit. Mac would fire me, Julia. Julia considers. But think of the publicity, Dad. Everybody would know about Ruby. You want me to put up a sign that shows Ruby in a zoo with the word home on it in giant letters. George gestures toward my pictures. A sign, incidentally, that just happens to have been made by a gorilla. Exactly. And you want me to do this without Mac's permission, George asks. Exactly. No, George says. No way. Julia goes to the edge of the ring, careful not to step on any of my paintings. She picks up Mac's claw stick. She walks back and hands it to her father. George runs a finger along the blade. She's just a baby, Dad. Don't you want to help her? But how would it help, Jules? Even if lots of people see Ivan's sign, it doesn't mean anything's going to change. I'm not exactly sure yet. Julia shakes her head. Maybe people will see the sign and they'll know this isn't where Ruby belongs. Maybe they'll want to help too. George sighs. He looks at Ruby. She waves her trunk. It's a matter of principle, Dad. Principal. No, L-E, George corrects. Dad, what if Ruby ends up like Stella? George looks at me, at Ruby, at Julia. He drops the claw stick. The ladder, he says, is in the storage closet. The next morning, I watch Mac's car slam to a halt in the parking lot. He leaps out and stares at the billboard. His jaw is open. He doesn't move for a long time. A mad gorilla is loud, but a mad human can be loud too, especially when he's throwing chairs and turning over tables and breaking the cotton candy machine. He's not happy. That means they did it, right? George and Julia changed the billboard. Mac is kicking a trash can across the food court when the phone rings. He answers it, red-faced and sweating. "What the?" he demands. He glares at me. "I don't know what you're—" he starts to say, but then he stops to listen. "Who? Julia who?" he asks. Sure, George's kid? She's the one who called you?" More talking. With the phone to his ear, Matt comes closer to my cage, eyeing me suspiciously. Yeah, he says. "He paints." "Sure." "We've been selling his art for quite a while now." Another long pause. "Yeah, absolutely. It was my idea." Mac nods and a smile starts at the corners of his mouth. "Photos? No problem. You want to see him in action? Come on down. Have a look. We're open 365 days a year. You can't miss us. We're right off I-95. Mac picks up the overturned trash can. "Yeah, I think he'll be adding more pictures. It's what do you call it? A work in progress." When the call is done, Mac shakes his head. "Impossible," he says. And an hour later, a man with a camera comes to take my picture. He's from the local paper, the one that Julia called. "How about you take one of me with the elephant?" Mac suggests. He drapes his arm around Ruby's back, grinning as the camera clicks. "Perfect," the man says. "Perfect," Mac agrees. A photo of my billboard is in the newspaper. Mac tapes the story onto my window. Every day, more curious people arrive. They park in front of the billboard. They point and shake their heads. They take photos. Then they come into the mall and buy my paintings. While visitors watch, I dip my hands in fresh buckets of paint. I make pictures for the gift shop and pictures to add to the billboard. Trees with birds, a newborn elephant with glittering black eyes, a squirrel, a bluebird, a worm. I even paint Bob so he can be on the billboard too. I can tell he likes the picture, although he says I didn't quite capture his distinguished nose. Every afternoon, Mac and George add my new pictures to the billboard. People slow their cars while they work. Drivers honk and wave. My gift shop pictures now cost $65 with a frame. I have some new names. People call me the ape artist, the primate Picasso. I have visitors from morning till night, and so does Ruby. But nothing's changed for her. Every day at 2, 4, and 7, Ruby plods through the sawdust with Snickers on her back. And every night she has bad dreams. "Bob," I say, after I've soothed Ruby to sleep with a story, "my idea isn't working." Bob opens one eye. "Be patient." "I'm tired of being patient," I say. So do you think his idea is going to work? We'll find out a little bit more next time.